I'm very pleased to be part of this workshop today, and thank you for the invitation. I have very close relations with Romania, and I'm honored to be with you here and share my experience. I will try to make some general presentation of what we are doing in UNECE. And then I'm open for discussion. As Sasa earlier mentioned, more than 1 billion residents live in informal settlements all over the globe, and they must be protected from COVID-19, from poverty, from climate change, and other disasters. We have to keep that in mind. And what we have accomplished in UNECE, it is the self-made cities, as mentioned earlier. Then we had another publication and assessment of some formalization projects that was made in some years later in 2015. We have a more detailed booklet published by UN Habitat about Albania and Greece, the situation as it was in 2010. And we have ended up with some guidelines for formalization. So I will put more emphasis on that. Yeah, actually, yes, I noticed that Sasa was talking about 13 million in Europe. I guess that was in EU countries or what, and then we have 15 million approximately in the UNECE region. I think they are much more, and they are much more are now feeling insecure in general about their house. If you see the Printex study that is not included here and it's very recently published. And also very recently, apart from the Printex study, we published the UNECE post-COVID-19 recovery action plan for informal settlements, which is also an interesting publication, and I may give you more information in another presentation. So what we learned from all these large numbers of people ended up living in informal settlements, that housing is important, that there is something in the system that makes land administration and management of land a really complex and inefficient task. All these people cannot be wrong, probably not. They should not be punished for choosing that solution. We do wish people to live in homes that are decent and affordable. This is true. No country has enough public funds to cover the social housing for all its members. So all countries need the involvement of the private sector in that. They need investments. All this housing stock can potentially become an asset. So therefore we formalize and we register. So we give them access to credit. And when neither the state nor the private sector provide the supply for affordable housing types and quantities to satisfy the current demand, people build informally. This is the truth. And I don't know if we can stop that. The question is how much newcomers each country can absorb, because there is a lot of migration around. However, there are tools that it can be controlled to a certain way. Now, Sasa has already mentioned the typology of informal settlements in our region. I can try to give you some kind of terminology and what size, types, and causes and impacts have created this extended phenomenon in the recent years. Why is it necessary to deal with informal development? Why now? What and how to formalize it? And I will give you also some brief description of the overall process for formalization. And the key concept of formalization and how to formalize in a reliable, affordable, inclusive, and timely manner to meet the SDGs by 2030. So we decided not to make any exclusions. So we have a very inclusive definition that the informal real estate or informal construction or illegal or whatever you call it is an unauthorized property unit or construction, either lacking planning and construction permits, or they also lack property titles. This is important too. Or both, or they may have already property titles or planning and construction permits, but they build in excess of such permits, which again brings this real estate out of legality and of the economic cycle. So we have all kinds of size and types, mainly residential, but not only. Some of them are of fairly good construction, but still substandard because it is self-made. Some of them are less good, or maybe there are slums too. But the majority are of fairly good condition and can be legalized. Some of them are multi-story. There are some hotels also, some expensive, as I already mentioned, within the urban network or in the periphery, or even in the rural areas or in the forests. So the causes are multiple: political changes, rapid urbanization, internal migration, conflicts, marginalization, disasters, cumbersome authorization processes for home improvements and modernization, corruption also. Whenever we have a lot of regulations, corruption is also there. It is difficult to monitor. Absence of policies to adopt pro-growth planning, as well as affordable housing. A lot of weaknesses of the private sector, the constructors, the developers, lack of political will to legally empower residents by recognizing existing rights from especially in the ex-Soviet countries, reluctance of state agencies to support integrated economic and environmental reforms, and the list is endless. So why to care? Because this phenomenon is a social challenge mainly. Because both constructions and residents may lack of documents and remain unregistered. It is part of the general informal sector, the informal development. And this is not good at all for the residents. Informal labor usually is not paid well. The lack of all privileges, they suffer from evictions, unemployment risks, all these. And these are exaggerated during the pandemic. We have experienced that, and the pandemics came to stay, as we have been discussing before we started this workshop today. And as we have realized the last 2 years, substandard housing suffer of a lot of risks. We experience flooding, fires, earthquakes, the pandemic also. So we understand that we must improve the neighborhoods, we must do something better. So this is both a social and economic challenge. And there is also environmental, there are also environmental challenges, I will mention later, a lot of environmental challenges. But the solution to that, we think that for the majority, if we have a lot, and if it is in the self-made cities, in the ex-Soviet countries, then the solution is not to keep all this real estate out of registration, and it is to provide, to recognize the rights, the property rights, and to empower people with legal titles. It is very, very important. It's the power of legal titles and the power of registration, the power of data, two different things. Title provision provides security against land grabbing and evictions, provides rights over the investment, mobilizes the debt capital and converts it into productive capital. This is very, very important for both for the economy of the people, but also for the national economy. Provides access to credit and funding and with minimal lending risks and legal protection to the people in general. And then it is also the power of data. If we register, then we have people there, we have construction there, it is all registered. And if we do it in an inclusive manner, then we can uncover inequalities, we allow for fair governance, fair policies, we can plan to provide service provision and to provide services. We can develop more fair and inclusive policies and also to provide urgent humanitarian support in cases of disasters. And we have experienced that in several disasters all over the years. So yes, the majority of that has to have legal titles. So of course, it is also a very important issue to formalize the rental market, as Sasa mentioned earlier, because in most of these countries, rental markets are not yet very well formalized. Therefore, people also when they rent houses, they feel insecure because it is not formalized. I don't mean that the rental market has to have restrictions or that people, when they rent people, they have to be there for several years or permanently or such things, but at least they have to be formalized. They have to register the contract, at least for the years that they make the contract, so that they must be protected. And there are other issues also that we have to take care and improve the rental markets so that this can be a solution, an alternative to home ownership. So why to care? It is, as I said, also an economic challenge. It's risky investments, severe unemployment risks, loss of public revenue. It affects productivity. It distorts competition, and it also influences the job opportunities if everything is informal, and it has a great impact on GDP. We have produced also some detailed studies on the impact of GDP if we keep on having informal constructions and informal rights in the economy. So this is important. And then we come to the environmental challenge, as I mentioned earlier. This pollution of air, soil, water, untreated sewage discharge. This is very, very important into the rivers, the lakes, the sea, the underground. We have wells and sewages at the same land parcel. It is very difficult. Energy consumption is also a big problem, and it is going to continue to be a bigger problem. As I heard the question, if we are going to have bigger challenges in the future, yes, we are going to face bigger challenges. And we may have illegal logging or uncontrolled logging in the future also. Garbage collection is a big problem, very big problem, garbage treatment, all that. So you understand that we need to do something. So what to formalize and to what extent? Well, if it is manageable, then you can think about resettlement. If you don't have to do too much, then you can resettle, because resettlement is a big project and it takes time for that. Otherwise, this incremental improvement of the construction and of the economy, this may work. So legalize whatever can be legalized from the existing informal settlements. Of course, there are parts that you cannot legalize. You have to delineate those on a map, and you have to say these cannot be legalized, but not the majority. The majority has to be included. Why? Because we need to meet the SDGs, because we need to meet the new urban agenda requirements, the voluntary guidelines for responsible governance of tenure, a lot of documents that you can use to develop your strategy for legalization. Why now? Why is it urgent? Because so far we have not made much progress for the UN Development Agenda 2030, the first years of the implementation. But still, COVID-19 came along and caused additional delays and impacts. As I already mentioned, we have more unemployed, more poor, new poor people to add into this category. And then we have recognized that although COVID-19 cannot be localized as other disasters, for example, a flooding or an earthquake, still it has a higher localized concentration in informal settlements. We know that, we know very well that, and we understand that people are most exposed and less prepared there in informal settlements, lack of services, densities, urban densities. They live all together in one room or something, or even if they have built more rooms, then they cannot afford to warm all of them. And then they, in the wintertime, they all come into one room. For example, basic infrastructure is poor, lack of geospatial information for evidence-based actions is a big issue. And restoring global health is an uppermost priority. And we know that these people live in informal settlements, but they move around in the city and they contribute to the economy of the city, actually. And these people have to be more secure than the others in terms of health. So how to act? We have encouraged countries to go along and formalize in a fit for purpose way as much as they can, what they can formalize. We don't say everything. But then after the assessment we did, as I mentioned earlier, then we recognize that some policies often lack a concrete fit for purpose strategy, and they may be not very inclusive, and maybe they last long and the momentum is missed, or they start with the best intentions but become bogged down, and then there is a government change and everything is changing. Or these projects, they really reflect that governments often understand the problem, but they don't fully understand and realize the size of its impacts, the economic impact, the social impact, the environmental impact. Therefore, we realize that there is a need for guidelines. And these guidelines are developed for the politicians, to be used by politicians, by central and local government, by parliament members, because we have to build the momentum. We have to build the public awareness. And among all the politicians, they have to make it an ownership. They have to understand that this is not an issue for political conflict. So they have to understand that we have agreed to formalize what can be formalized, and then the conflict becomes the political conflict, not in these issues. It is very risky. To local authorities, also to professionals, to academia, to everyone, they have to understand, we have to build awareness, and you have to develop a real strategy to give people understand why you have to go beyond the established scientific engineering and planning practice in order to successfully deal with property market challenges, funding challenges, structural stability challenges, environmental challenges, and the difficult ethic challenges to formalize the informal, to legalize the illegal, and hostile reactions to possible hostile reactions to a formalization project that come from various how can I say, ideas and ideologies, because we say that we must be inclusive. Now, the key concept underlying the need for formalization is that we must have as clear, as fair and affordable and transparent property titles in the majority of the real estate of the country. And and that is because we want to improve the living conditions and put this real estate into the market for sale or rent. Even if we want to make the rental market, then we have to have clear property titles. So the majority of the real estate has to have clear titles. And people should be able to sell or rent if they no longer want to stay to live in this neighborhood, and they look for a job in another neighborhood or in another city or in another country. And we must be able to use the majority of the real estate as a collateral for capital. And there is another reason also that I insist in that, because we need to do major reforms. And existing informal rights should certainly be recognized and legalized prior to any land reform for upgrading and planning, because most of the people have invested their income there, so they have to be treated fairly. And it is very, very important. All this is a participatory process. It is very, very important to build trust within the society, and people and residents need to feel that they are treated fairly. So especially under the new economic challenges imposed by the pandemic. So the more fairly we treat them, the more chances we have that our projects will succeed. Now, the structure of the guidelines is the following. First of all, we have to build awareness. We have to prepare the strategy for formalization. We have to know very well and to agree all the key stakeholders, all the local players, politicians, government and opposition, local authorities, all agencies, they have to be involved for that in developing the strategy and in agreeing with the strategy, to build the political will, to analyze the type of informalities that you have there, the majority of them, and how you want to treat them, to carry out cost-benefit analysis study, to agree on a fit-for-purpose strategy, to see what you want to do, how fast you want to do it, how much this will cost to the people, to the nation, and how much time you need to finish it, to see tangible results. And then once you agree on that, you have to develop the communication plan to make it open, to communicate it into the people, to engage the people, to engage the society. We have to work here more. We have to give more information how we manage to engage the society. And I have another lecture that sometime maybe we can see together about engagement of the society. Most of the land management projects are participatory. So we need people to be engaged. We need people to support. Then to draft the strategy report, to get the approval from the government, then to go ahead and prepare the framework for formalization. And there we have to decide. We have to involve all our local experts and maybe also international experts to define areas and categories of constructions, to determine the legal regulatory issues, to define the appropriate actions for formalization, to define the registration process, to design the draft formalization process, to determine the levels of penalties and fees. Again, a very important issue. Keep in mind that we don't formalize in order to make money, in order to make money from the people, to have high penalties and high fees. We need to engage people. So the lower fees and the lower penalties, it is preferable. To determine the involved institutions and to determine and implement the administrative system that will support the formalization. These are very complex and difficult aspects that you have to be very careful when you plan, when you prepare the framework for that. If you're going to do it in a scalable manner, if you're going to formalize one informal settlement in the periphery of one city, then it is different. Then you have to formalize to go ahead. Once you make the framework for formalization, then you have to formalize the constructions. There are also other issues that you need to take care to prepare the inventory of informal properties, to accept and process the submitted documents, to register informal constructions, because we have identified that some projects find this a bottleneck. When they come to registration, then the capacity of the agency is overloaded, and then they cannot do it fast, and there is a big delay in the project. To impose legal action as required, to impose and collect penalties, to monitor the formalization. Another important issue, you have to monitor from the very beginning, to identify bottlenecks, to change it if you cannot do it, if you understand that it does not work well, to be able to change the process fast and quickly. And then actions to be done in parallel to the formalization and the registration, and or following the formalization. For all that, there is no one solution. There is no an example that you can copy and implement. You must develop your own thing, analyzing your own informalities, your own situation, your own legal framework, your own constitutional restrictions, your own situation. But we have picked up the good experiences from various projects, and through that we have developed this process. So the same way, you cannot require improvement of neighborhoods or improvement of constructions in general for everything. Some constructions may be fairly enough that they don't need improvement. Some neighborhoods also maybe be built up better than others. So you have to think locally there, and your improvements, both of constructions and of neighborhoods, have to be independent from registration and formalization, and they have to be either in parallel or following the formalization. And they can be co-financed by owners, by donors, by local authorities, by the private sector. There is a lot of experience in that, and again, building partnerships is another important issue that we have another lecture on that, how to build partnerships and try to do all these improvements. In addition to the improvements, you have also to develop risk reduction, disaster risk reduction plans. This could be a disaster risk reduction plan that refers to COVID or to floodings or to earthquakes or whatever, because you cannot improve everything and bring everything into the standards that you don't need the disaster risk reduction plan. Also, we do need that in the formal cities, as we experience now the climate change and its impact. So this is the general thing that I want to tell you. And here I can give you a little bit of more information about how to prepare the framework and how for formalization, and how to define the areas and categories. Here you see an example. For example, before you start doing anything, you have to delineate on a base map the areas and zones that can be formalized and those that cannot be formalized. As I said, there are issues that we cannot, we have to take into consideration, and we cannot formalize certain areas, but not too much, because we cannot afford to do too much. So it is critical what you have to not to formalize and what you have to formalize to decide. And even if deregulation is needed to formalize and to check the risks of what you decide, or to check the geomorphology, to check the risks. And then use fit-for-purpose methods to prepare this index map. You don't need to do detailed field surveys for that because we are never going to finish. So we have to use air photo, orthophoto map, and your experts there are very, very good. So our colleagues, we cooperate with them. They are very, very well qualified, and they can use fit for purpose methods for that. So once you define the zones, then within the zones you have to classify the various types of constructions that and the type of informality. These are two different things, and the classes, they may be, for example, single family, multi-floor, commercial buildings, complex buildings, industrial constructions, different types. So all these should be classified into maximum 3 to 4 classes, not too much. Fit for purpose way also there in the classification. And of course, you may have hotels, big centers. This should be a different category because each class requires different treatment for formalization. Then identify if some of those should not be formalized also within the areas that can be formalized. You may have buildings that cannot be formalized. So keep in mind that we have to be practical and we have to see what cannot be formalized. For example, build some informal construction building parks and streets in the middle of the routes of the street, the streams or the main roads, or close to the airports. We cannot afford to do that because we will have accidents. So each class needs different treatment, as I said. And then we'll have to, we classify the type of informality into legal informality and technical informality. And we consider legal informality, whatever can be characterized as illegal. For example, lack of titles, lack of permits, or all kinds of permits. And then we have to prioritize among that to clear out whatever can be cleared about ownership titles. Maybe some, if they occupy land for a long time, then you can use the adverse possession principle also. This is what we have done in Greece in several Roma settlements. We didn't do much resettlement for the Roma settlements in Greece. We have integrated that into the general formalization process from the past also, not in the recent also. And also in the recent, but inclusive approach was also in the past. And some of them, they have been provided the land by the state. I mean, the state recognized the rights on the land if they occupied the state land or land that belonged to the church. It was easier. Some of them used the adverse possession so that they will acquire the property titles. And some of that, because it was very difficult to continue the conflict with the landowners, unfortunately, they had to pay for the land. So they have been provided loans so that they will pay the landowner to acquire the title. And then once you clear out the titles, you must think and you must consider if your civil code needs to be improved. I guess there is a need for that, so that it will allow the creation of independent property units within a construction. And then you have to consider also mediation procedures, because if you try to solve all legal issues for title provision through the courts or through the existing legal framework, it is impossible. This is also experience here in Greece and experience in Serbia. And I mean, we experienced that not in the formalization project, but also in the cadastral project. So I suggested to my country last year through a World Bank study that we made to consider very seriously mediation procedures to solve all the problems, the legal aspects, so that we can very quickly and very fast provide the right titles to the people so that they will be able to register. Mediation is really important. And of course, in terms of planning, you have to be ready to take the political decision to provide amnesty, as mentioned earlier by Sasa. We provide planning amnesty for a number of years, and then we will reconsider, but we do not say that this is the best policy. Planning amnesty has to be clear as well as the titles. All these pending issues, they affect the market a lot. Then, of course, prioritization of title formalization is important, and illegal subdivisions or illegal or informalities in planning, and this should not be a handicap for title provision. So we have to go fast. As I said, the civil code, so that you have to take care of that, because maybe also in informal settlements in the periphery, maybe also built by Roma people, or that maybe are multi-story constructions that maybe they host more than one families, and so it is good to make independent property units that they can be sold and rented independently to clear out all this conflict within the families. Here again, I can provide more information how we do it here in Greece, and then the current trends from the legalization projects in our neighborhood is that transformation of long-standing rights of use to ownership rights should be made affordably, free of charge, or with symbolic and scalable fee. That's what we do also in the rural areas, because we have provided the right to use to the farmers for many, many years. And then we say up to a certain number of years, then the farmers can buy the land and they can have property titles, ownership of the land. We do that. We have an ongoing project here. And also sometimes when we have illegal subdivisions of the parcels, then this affects also the ownership of the construction. So we have a current legal reform that we can create property titles to individual constructions built in illegally subdivided parcels. So we try to solve this also. And if the land belongs to the state and this is the first and only residence of the people, then again, it's a social policy for to acquire it with a symbolic fee. So there are policies, good practice policies into that, into title provision. And of course, if it is not the first and only property, then you can go with the market value. So the technical informality usually refers to the non-compliance with the standards, lack of, and this ends up to the lack of operational and occupancy permits. People are not able to use the construction because it does not comply to the standards normally, but keep in mind that anyway they use the construction. So this again has to be treated a little bit flexible, in a little bit flexible way. So for single family constructions, small constructions up to the 3 floors maximum when they are built by experienced workers, you have to judge your own situation there. May acquire operational permits without inspections because it is bureaucratic, costly, and includes corruption also if you go for on-site inspections there. But for big constructions, then you have to be more serious. Then you have to assess the risks. Then you have to involve the private sector, etc. So this is here some examples of how we have formalized the Roma. You see here, and there we need to think more about their education also, and about their habit to move around. So we have provided, for example, a card to all students that they can move to different schools and all that. And we have actually managed to allow them build new constructions and have them improved. So we have a very successful experience from formalizing the Roma settlements here in Greece. This is an interesting part of the presentation that you may like to see sometime. And we provide them access to the loans and okay, yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much.